April of 1998. Benton County, Indiana. The John Deere dealer in Fowler had a GPS auto steer demonstration unit on a 7800 tractor in the parking lot, and every farmer in the county who came in for seed or parts that week took a turn in the cab. Delbert Moody drove past the dealer twice that week on his way to and from the elevator. He did not stop. He was 67 years old, had farmed 480 acres of Benton County corn and soybean ground since 1956. Flat ground, black silt loam, drainage tile laid every 30 feet across the entire farm. The kind of Benton County ground that produced 180 bushel corn in a good year and made a man reluctant to change anything that was working. He had been planting that ground in straight rows since 1956. He had been planting it straight with the same method since 1962, the year he'd moved from eyeballing the rows to string lines, after a wet spring had given him a planting window so narrow that he'd rushed and had 3 passes in the east field that would have embarrassed a first-year farmer. He'd been embarrassed enough. The string line method was his own construction, not from a book, not from the extension office, not from anywhere in particular. He had arrived at it over 2 seasons of trying things and keeping what worked and discarding what didn't. The neighbor to his south, a man named Wayne Kreider, had bought a Trimble Ag GPS guidance system in March of 1998. $11,800 installed. Wayne had mentioned the purchase at the coffee counter at the elevator 3 times in 2 weeks, and Delbert had been present for 2 of those conversations. He had said it sounded like a good system. He had gone home and checked his string-line stakes. The method was this. Before any field was planted, Delbert drove to both ends of the field and established baseline stakes. The baseline ran along the longest field dimension. In Benton County, that was usually the north-south length, the fields having been platted in the original township survey with their long axes running true north. The stakes were 48-inch steel fence posts, the standard round steel post sold at every farm supply store in Indiana. He drove them at both ends of each baseline, 2 posts per field end, spaced exactly 30 inches apart, the spacing matching his 12-row planter's row width. The 30-inch spacing was established with a steel tape measure. He kept the same tape for 34 years, a 100-foot Lufkin. The case worn smooth where his hand held it, but the blade still accurate to 1/16 of an inch when he checked it against the reference marks on his shop door. From the baseline posts, he ran 12-gauge galvanized steel wire, not string, wire, which held its tension in wind and didn't sag between posts the way cotton string did in cold mornings. He'd switched from cotton string to wire in 1966 after a breezy April had given him one bad planting day when the string had bellied out between the end posts. The wire ran the full field length. In his largest field, 140 acres, a half-mile of field length north to south, the wire spanned 2,640 feet. He walked the wire before each planting pass, checking for deflection. If he could see the wire deviate from true at any point when he sighted from one end, he tightened it. The planter cab ride was simple. Align the left wing marker with the wire, maintain that alignment through the pass, lift at the end, back around the headland, drop the wing marker on the last planted row for the next pass. The wire was the guide for the first pass only. The row markers dropped by the planter established the guide for every subsequent pass. The first pass was everything. If the first pass was straight, the field was straight. Wayne Kreider drove down the county road on the 3rd day of Delbert's planting in April of 1998. He pulled off the road and watched 2 planting passes from the truck. He drove to Delbert's farm that evening. He said the rows looked straight. Delbert said he'd heard the Trimble system was accurate to 4 inches. Wayne said it was. Delbert said his wire was accurate to half an inch when he sighted it right. Wayne looked at him for a moment. He said his system didn't require him to walk the field. Delbert said that was true. He said the walk was how he knew what the field looked like before he planted it. Wayne drove home. Delbert had been walking his fields before planting since 1962. Not for the wire. The wire had come later. Before the wire, the walking had been how he found problems. Heaved tile heads, frost boils, low spots that would pond in a wet spring and drown a stand. Rocks that had worked up through the soil over the winter along the field edge where the limestone subsoil was close to the surface. He found things on those walks that he didn't see from the cab. The wire gave him a reason to make the walk systematic. He walked the wire, and walking the wire walked him through the field. It was not an accident that the wire ran the field's longest dimension. The walk along the wire was the longest walk he could take through any given field, and still have a reason for doing it. He'd found a broken tile outlet in the east field in April of 1979 by walking the wire. The outlet was at the 800-foot mark, half a mile from the field entrance, not a place he would have driven past before planting. The break was showing as a small wet seep at the surface. He'd fixed it before planting. If he'd found it at cultivation, he'd have lost 6 weeks of drainage capacity through the wettest part of the season. He'd found a low spot developing in the north field in April of 1987. A settlement over an old drainage ditch fill that had compressed unevenly over 10 years. He'd known it was there in a general way. The walk showed him it had gotten 2 inches deeper over the winter and was now going to pond water in a 1-acre area on the first heavy rain. He'd had tile work done before planting. The wire was the planting guide. The walk was the drainage survey. He'd never separated the two in his thinking. The Benton County Extension Office in Fowler held a precision agriculture meeting in March of 1999. The meeting covered GPS guidance systems, variable rate application technology, and yield mapping. 22 farmers attended. Delbert went because he went to extension meetings. He had attended every one since 1958. The presenter, an extension specialist from Purdue in West Lafayette, showed yield maps from GPS-guided operations and non-GPS operations in comparable Benton County fields. He said GPS guidance systems reduced overlap in planting and application passes, saving seed and chemical costs. He said the accuracy improvement over manual guidance reduced skips and doubles in planting, which affected both yield and uniformity. He said GPS guidance produced measurably straighter rows than manual methods in virtually all operator comparisons. Delbert raised his hand. He said he'd been running wire guides since 1962, and that in 37 years of wire guidance, he had not had a skip or double in a planting pass that was attributable to guidance error. He said he'd had equipment malfunctions, a planter unit that had plugged in 1974 and left a skip, which he'd found on his walk after the pass and replanted by hand. He said guidance errors and equipment errors were different categories. The specialist said wire guidance was operator-dependent in a way that GPS was not. Delbert said most things worth doing were operator-dependent. The specialist said that was fair. He moved on to the variable rate application section. His son Paul had been farming alongside him since 1983. Paul was 39 in 1999 and had been watching the GPS technology with the interest of a man who intended to be farming in 2019 and wanted to understand what the operation would look like by then. He asked Delbert in the spring of 1999 what he thought about the GPS systems. Passed the comments at the extension meeting. Delbert said he thought they were useful for large operations, where multiple operators were running equipment across the same fields. He said on a farm where one man knew every foot of ground. The GPS was solving a problem he didn't have. Paul asked how long the wire setup took per field. Delbert said the stakes went in an hour per field. The wire ran in 20 minutes. He checked it before each planting day in about 10 minutes per field. Paul said that was maybe 2 hours per field over the season. Delbert said it was closer to 3, counting the morning walks. Paul said the GPS would save that 3 hours. Delbert said he'd found a broken tile at the 800-foot mark in the East Field in 1979. Paul said he knew about that tile. Delbert said the GPS wouldn't have found it. Paul said that was probably right. He let the subject rest. Delbert Moody retired from active farming in 2006. He was 75 years old. He handed the 480 acres to Paul, who had been running most of the field operations since 2001. The wire stakes came out of the equipment shed in Paul's first solo planting season and went into the truck. Paul drove the stakes at both ends of the first field. He ran the wire. He walked the wire before the first planting pass. He found a heaved tile head at the 600-foot mark in the south field. He hadn't known it was there. He had the tile contractor address it before planting. He drove straight. He told Delbert about the tile head that evening. Delbert said that was why you walked the wire. Paul said he understood that now. He ran the wire through the 2006, 2007, and 2008 seasons. In the spring of 2009, he bought a Trimble AG25 guidance system for the planting tractor. The price had come down from the $11,800 Wayne Kreider had paid in 1998 for 200 hours installed, with a trade-in allowance on the old light bar guidance system Paul had been using since 2004. He kept the wire stakes. He ran the wire in the field where he'd found the heaved tile head in 2006. He walked it every year. He ran the GPS on the other fields. Delbert had been driving the stakes since 1962. He'd driven them in 480 acres of Benton County ground across 44 seasons. He'd walked every foot of every field every spring for 44 years because the wire gave him a reason. Paul said once that the GPS had made the planting easier. Delbert said that was probably right. He said the tile head in the south field in 2006 would have been easier to miss. Paul said he knew. He walked the wire in that field every spring. He still does. Delbert died in 2014. He was 83 years old. The 100-foot Lufkin tape measure, case worn smooth where his hand had held it, blade still accurate to 1/16 of an inch, is on the shelf in the equipment shed. The wire stakes are in the bucket by the door. The south field has a GPS guidance track recorded for it now, 14 years of planting passes logged in the system's memory. The track is accurate to 4 inches. Paul walks the south field before planting every spring, not with a wire. The GPS handles the guidance. He walks it because it is the longest walk through that field, and the longest walk through a field is how you find what you wouldn't otherwise find. He found a low spot developing over an old ditch fill in 2019, 2 inches deeper than the previous spring. He had tile work done before planting. He told his son about it that evening. His son is 24 years old. He said he understood why you walked the field.